Hi, welcome everyone to the JLC Distant Learning. Today I'm going to show you how to do a painting, or if you have markers or crayons or whatever medium you have, of the story of Moses in the Nile River in the basket. Okay, so take your ultramarine blue paint and make your horizon line. And I put two little pyramids in the background. And next I'm going to draw in the Nile River. And oh, I don't really like that line. I'm going to fix it. All you have to do is fix it, and then you erase it by putting your brush in water and wiping it away. You can do it as long as the paint is still wet. And there's my Nile River, and here's the little basket that Moshe's in, and there is Paro's daughter who rescues him. She stretched out her arm to a little palm tree. And just make a little more detail in the basket. And there's her arm that miraculously extended out to the basket and saved him. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay in a wash of green for the bulrushes next to the Nile. Just very, very broad strokes. Not a lot of detail yet. But just remember that anything that's in the foreground, that's in the front of the painting, that's going to have more detail than the background, because the closer something is to you, the more detail you can see. So just lay in a light layer of paint, of green, and then we're going to put in some blue for the water. Again, just a wash. If you're doing it in marker, you won't be able to do it this way, but you can just lay in your blue. And then we're going to put another color blue. I used cerulean blue for the sky and did it very, very light, because the sky is definitely not as dark as the Nile River would be. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is going to put a little more detail on the skin and the arm. Again, just a thin layer if you're doing it in paint, because you can, once it's dry, you can add on to it. I like to just keep things sort of in a washy layer of paint in the beginning to make sure that I like what I put in there, and also just to cover the whole painting and not get very precious in one area of detail and leave the rest undone. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little more dark in the basket, and then I'm going to paint a little bit more of her dress. I made it yellow so it'll stand out against the green. You can pick any color you want. I wouldn't do it blue or green because you want it to be, to stand out, to be contrast. Put in some brown hair. Again, just very, very simplistic strokes so that you can touch it up later. Now, for the pyramids, I want to show that the sun is beating down on one side, and then it's the shadow of the other side. So the front part is facing us is the lighter side, and then you see where I'm putting in the darker brown for the shadow. I just added a little white to lighten that up a little bit, make it more of a contrast between the dark and the light. I'll go back to it later again, but in the meantime I'm just trying to get in some broad strokes. Now I'm going to put in the base of the palm tree, and just give it a little bit of indication of detail that it's a palm tree. And then I use a flat brush so I can just stroke the palm fronds and make it look like a nice palm tree. It's very easy to do if you just use the way the brush works. If you use a pointed brush and not a flat brush, it still works, but I prefer using a flat brush. So if you have a flat square brush, it's better. The same thing with the bulrushes. You're going to use the same flat square brush and just stroke up and up and up and put all the bulrushes. Like I said before, the details will be more visible in the foreground, in the front of the painting, and you won't be able to see any detail of the bulrushes in the back because they're far away. So just keep adding in the bulrushes around, and I switched from a darker green here. I added a darker green. You can still see the lighter green underneath, which makes the painting more interesting because there's obviously, things underneath that you can't really see, but it'll still appear to be green. Here's another dark. So I like to do 3 values: light, medium, and dark. So I did the lightest light underneath. That was the first layer. And then I did a medium green as the second layer. Now I'm adding a darker green. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more detail to the water. I'm going to go back. Oh, no, sorry. I'm going to the, adding a little in the back there. But after that, then I'm going to add in the detail of the Nile River. I'm going to make it darker. I'm just touching up a little bit in the background so that we can see that it looks far away. Okay, here we go with a darker blue. Now you want the Nile River to be pretty dark blue and more heavily painted and not such a wash because it's the water and you wouldn't be able to see through it. And I'm just indicating the water around, going around her arm and around the basket. Again, keeping in mind that you're painting water, so I just made it sort of a dabbing motion with my brush and paint to indicate the water. Just like when I did the bulrushes and the palm fronds, I did it in that sort of stroked style. And the water I did in a different style of paint stroke. Now that I just put in, I'm going to add Moses' mother in the background watching to make sure her baby is okay. Okay, now I'm adding another layer of skin tone onto her arm as it stretches out. I like to paint in layers. So now I'm adding another layer of paint to their faces. And I'm going to go through the painting and just adding, little by little, more and more layers, making it more defined in the front. And you see Paro's daughter, she's, kneeling at the river. And she's outstretched her arm, and the bulrushes are around her. Again, adding some more detail in the front, making it darker in the front. And it gets lighter as it goes behind. And again, just very, very little detail in the background because it's far away and you wouldn't really see any detail in the background. Now I'm adding this yellow ochre color, and those are just another part of the bulrush. Just to add that in, it looks pretty. Adds a little contrast to just the green. And here I'm going to start working a little bit more on the baby's face. It's a little hard because the paint is still wet, but and you have to make it small. You don't want to make very dark eyes because it'll look strange. So I'm just trying to do a little bit of detail on the face. I'll go back to it later when the paint's drier. But I'm just indicating it now. A little red for the mouth, little eyes. And you just see as I go layer by layer and add a little hair. Okay, make it a little dark inside the basket because it's got a little cover on it, so it's protecting baby Moses from the sun. And I'm working on my little basket there. Giving a little indication of that it's made out of the reeds. And the next thing I'm going to work on is a little more detail on the basket. Give a little lighter color on top. And I'm making the water darker to contrast around the basket. Because now you can see the basket contrasting against the dark water of the Nile and against her arm. Because when you're making a drawing or a painting, the contrast is what makes it interesting. If it's all the same value, it's not as interesting. And here I'm making the water very dark and very and not opaque. I mean, I'm making it opaque and not translucent, and that makes it more interesting. And in the background, I'm keeping the water. As the Nile River goes further away, it's less concentrated. It's still more of a washy color because it's further away and you want it to look far away. If you made it as the same as the front, you wouldn't be able to distinguish what's in the foreground and what's in the background. That's just a little painting technique. I'm brightening up that yellow so that you can see her poking out of the reeds or the bulrush. And making her hair a little bit darker. Again, I paint in layers so that, I don't know, that's just my technique. I paint in layers. I don't try and land on it the first time, putting heavy paint on the first time, because you can't really get rid of it so easily if you make something that you don't really like. And now I'm adding more dark around the sides. And then I just keep going through my painting and darkening up the front end and making more detail in the front. And I'm going back to my tree. I want to add a little more darker green to the fronds. And here you see I'm just adding more green to make the palm tree more lush. I'll work on the base of the tree. Add those little lines. Put little highlights on the green to show the sun hitting the leaves. I just took a little white and I mixed it with my green. Make that shadow of the pyramid, make that a little bit darker, because like I said, contrast makes it more interesting. So I just want the contrast of the shadow and the light on the pyramid. Okay, I'm adding a little more detail to the Nile River. Just going to take a little, I use that brush there that I'm using it as sort of my eraser. It's just got water on it, and I'm pulling out some of the paint that I don't want there. Adding some more green. I just go around the painting so that it always looks like it's at the same level, that there's not one area that's painted more than the other. And that way it gives me a good idea of what the finished painting is going to look like. Try and add a little more detail to the face. A little hard because it's still wet. If I make it darker around her, then she'll pop out more. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm just adding another layer of green paint around her so she is more contrasted to her background. And again, I'm painting very quickly, so you can take your time when you're doing it. I'm just doing it quickly for this video. Show you what I'm doing, but again, you don't have to paint this fast. And I'm just looking at my painting and see where I want to put the next detail in, what area I want to bring out. I'm going to make the sunlight on the pyramid a little lighter. Again, making it more contrasting. Also makes it appear further away. Because it's lighter now, now it looks further away than it did before. Just add a little shadow in the background there, just at the very top layer of the horizon line. Just going around checking, make sure there's no real big areas or any areas of unpainted canvas. I like to have at least one thin layer on every area of the canvas. I'm going to add a little cloud. I took some white, and it's not pure white. I toned it down a little bit with some blue, so it wouldn't be too contrasty. And I'm just adding little light tones of cloud, just a little puff of cloud, just to give it the sky a little more interest. You have your painting. I hope you enjoyed. Send me your painting so I can see what you did.